Hello. Happy Sunday if you're tuning in. Sunday afternoon for me, Sunday evening for anyone who's tuning in from Europe. But as I understand, there are all kinds of people that have found me via YouTube over the last few months. And so, I'm kind of trying this out for the first time just to see how it's going to go. And, like we'll just kind of roll with it as it goes. But firstly, I wanted to kind of just take the opportunity to speak to those of you who have come across the channel in the last few months more directly, and first of all to say thank you. I know I say thank you a lot, but like it really does mean a lot to me that so many of you have shared your thoughts with me about the contest this year, about the songs that you really like, about the ones that we disagree on. I really like to hear what the way that people see the contest and the different ways that we can have a viewpoint about Eurovision. As you can see, I've got a co-host here today. Little dog butt over there. This is Charlotte. Cusquinha, o que está fazendo? She's got, we give her these little chews, and she, for whatever reason, likes to push them behind pillows. But in any case, I hope you're all doing well. I'm going to switch over to the comments here. Hello, Covey. Nice to see you. Hello to Wright Bailey. Nice to see you. I know that you've seen me a lot on Eurovox, and we've interacted a lot before. Thank you so much, Covey. Again, I really appreciate all the feedback that you've been giving me. And hello to Lori. Thank you very much. Hi, Alejandro. It's not a kitty, but yeah, it definitely from behind could look like a cat. And I suppose that maybe she has certain like cat-like temperaments. I mean, she is quite. She's got quite a personality, which is very cat-like. And I'm also a big fan of cats too. Ry Bailey saying Austria and Finland are his faves. Great choices. Among my favorites too. I have had Who the Hell is Edgar on a loop in my head. Like, don't even need to be listening to it. It's just there, going constantly, constantly, constantly. And yeah, it's just like one thing that you should know is that my on my mom's side, I am Austrian. So the Austrian entry, like I always hope that it's going to be something that I like. And for the last few years, they haven't really clicked with me quite as much. But yeah, like it's such a unique song, right? And I know there's big expectations for it. There's a lot of curiosity for how they're going to handle it on stage, and I think there's lots of reasons to be curious about it too. So it's like obviously we're all hoping that it's going to live up to the expectations, but nonetheless they've still created like a really fun song that's also like poignant and probably a bit cathartic for them as well, to kind of put all their frustrations that they experience in the music industry into something that people really like, right? Hello to Constantine. Nice to see you. And everyone, let me know where you're from. I'd love to know I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Yeah, especially because, as you know, like I don't live in Europe, and it's always great to see just how far the contest gets, like the various ways that people come across it. For me, when I was living in Spain a few years ago, that's when I like really got into it. And ever since then, it's been hard to kind of divorce from my life, because I just kind of I've always gone back to it, and I think that the way that it was described to me before then, because obviously I'd heard of Eurovision before that point, and people have their attitudes. Oh, it's just like this really big, over the top kind of thing that's really kish and not that serious. And like that is still true to a degree. But what really impressed me the very first time I saw it was just like how big of a production it was, and the music was not quite as trashy as it was made out to be. There are some that aren't necessarily to the standard of like what you hear on the radio here and elsewhere, but it's all part of the experience. And it's also really nice to see like the kind of outside of the box entries, how they reach the audience in different ways, or how they don't sometimes. Oh, and hello to Groots. Yes, I'm starting. I am starting to stream on this channel. We'll see. Again, we're kind of like seeing how it's going to go. I don't know how frequently I'll do these things, but I've been trying to put out a video once a week about the entries, because obviously, before I was doing the national selections, and with well gone. There's got to be stuff to talk about. And I've also been in preparations for Liverpool because I have decided that I am going to be going this year to the contest. It'll be my second time because I was there last year in Turin. So yeah, this is a bit more practical for me at the time, like balancing work and preparing the videos in the way that I do because they do actually take quite a bit of time. So this might be the way forward for the time being. Kobe's from Serbia, rooting for Finland and Austria. Nice. Rye Bailey's from London. Like we've talked so many times over YouTube, and I haven't actually asked, but I assumed that you were from the UK. Konstantin is from Bulgaria, originally living in Denmark. Very cool. And Laurie is tuning in from Alabama. Very nice. So please, I want to know what your favorite entries are this year. By the off chance that you're tuning in and you're like not that familiar with the Eurovision cycle, again, most of you probably know, but you might be wondering what's going on right now. So pre-parties are the big thing. I believe the London Eurovision party, whatever they call that, is today, and the Amsterdam one was yesterday. And that can be an opportunity for us to see how some of the performers that, if we haven't seen them, let's say in a national selection, how they are on stage, which is like, I think in years before, that's been a little bit more important to discover. Like I think back to 2019 when Duncan Lawrence from the Netherlands, when that song was released, it went straight to the top of the odds. And there was this big question about like, okay, well, he's this relatively new artist. He's really only been on the Voice before. How is he going to do like on stage performing his own song? And I remember that was a really big moment and it was actually in Amsterdam at what was probably the first pre-party. And yeah, like blew everyone's expectations away and like really cemented his spot in the at the top of the odds from that point until he actually won. But another thing that, like, if you've followed the pre-parties, that you'll probably know too, is that they're not always the most technically equipped, and there have been a number of performances that don't necessarily live up to expectations. And there is always a question of whether or not that's like on the artists or whether that's because it's just not. It's not the most comfortable environment to perform in. And then there's also an argument about like, you're not going. It's not always going to work out for you when you're a performer. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of layers to that. But I'd love to know what you have to say about those things as well, if you've been tuned into the developments of the pre-parties. But Konstantin saying Finland, Sweden, Austria, and Spain. Once again, I'm a basic Eurofan. I'm as basic a Eurofan as they come. Look, man, those are my favorites too. Like, I'm pretty sure I have a ranking and everything, and I'm pretty sure that's like those are my top four. Yeah, they are. Yeah, for me, it's Sweden, Spain, Finland, Austria. But like, it's only in that order because you have to. Like, you can't like just kind of put them all together, because really, like, the songs that I think really are the best songs are from Spain and Sweden. And I know that not everybody necessarily agrees. Well, not everybody agrees about anything, but yeah, to me, it's like those are the entries that are really, those four are really like upholding the year. So Solivano, 1981, from Ireland, living in London. Nice to see you. Bailey is saying, hopefully it's a nice and sunny day. Hopefully it's nice and sunny in May, but it's the UK, so it's unpredictable. Yeah, look, I've been to the UK many times before, and I'm not expecting it to be amazing weather-wise, but I will take whatever I can get. It's actually been really beautiful here this past week, so I don't think that's going to be topped per se. But yeah, I mean, the UK is known for rain, so it is what it is. Kobe's worried about Austria's staging the most. Yeah, and I think there's good reasons to be, well, maybe not like good reasons, but yeah, it's a big question, and especially whenever we have any kind of internally selected song where we haven't seen a made-for-television performance. And I want to emphasize that, because obviously we've seen them perform at the pre-parties, and the general attitude was that they did very well. But yeah, there's a number of things with that, because it is such a quirky song. It's we've been told to expect the choreography, so we have somewhat of an idea of like how the movement is going to go. But you have to, whenever you're playing with something with humor, you have to be careful about how you handle it, right? Because you can go to the point where it's a little bit ridiculous and looks, I don't know, like messy. And then you can kind of also do too much the other, like go too much in the other direction and underplay it. And yeah, I think with every humorous entry, it's all about striking that balance. And I think that among the best examples would be Iceland, both 2020 and 2021, which obviously we never saw Iceland 2020 on the Eurovision stage. But to me, it's like the perfect way to do something that is humorous, where the song is good. Like I think those were two amazing songs, but then you also are just kind of having fun with it. There's the kind of like deadpan presentation. There's all the kind of like memeable moments in the performance, and like it doesn't just stick to one joke and try to milk it throughout the entire duration of the performance. They have different things going on throughout the song. So yeah, I understand why you might be a bit worried. Alejandro saying, add Serbia, and those are my faves too. Yes, and I know that you've asked me about Alejandro. Alejandro, you've asked me about Serbia before. Um, I find it to be a very creative entry, and I have been working on a video that may or may not come out about it. But yeah, it is a very creative entry. I really liked learning about his inspirations for how he made the song, and it was inspired by what he was going through during the pandemic when he was isolating himself and mostly like playing video games and watching anime, and in the performance there are a number of allusions to those things. My favorite is actually how he's described the hello part, and for those who don't know, his inspiration was from The Sims, and how like in The Sims, when a character is being neglected, they break the fourth wall and they look at the camera and they're like, hello, like try and get your attention. So yeah, like super creative, but I do wonder if it might not be appreciated as much on stage, because the impressions that I've had from other people are that they just don't get it. And when I think about the first time that I watched it, I didn't dislike it, but I was kind of like I was wrapping my head around it. And so I don't necessarily think that it's not like it's not dead on arrival when it comes to qualifying. There is the fact that it is early in the running order, that like a lot of people tend to think of that as being a factor that works against any song. But it might not be the case, because Serbia tends to get diaspora support. They have Croatia as well. I'm sure that they're going to be exchanging points between the two of them. So I think that it could at least manage to qualify. I do think that if it were to get into the final, then it would probably not get a ton of jury support, just because it's like it doesn't have many of the things that juries tend to vote for. Like it's not a big vocal performance. It's not people often talk about the star power quality of a performer, and maybe some people might find that as like kind of an irrelevant point to evaluate a song on. But I do think that, especially because juries tend to be industry people, it's just something that they gravitate towards a bit more, and I don't think that entry has that quite a bit. But I think that kind of regardless of the results, it's still better that they send an entry like that has that creativity, that is still able to reach an audience. And even if they don't qualify, or if they finish really poorly, like it's still better to do that than to do something that is like aiming to be loved by everyone, but ends up being incredibly generic and really missing the mark, because then you haven't achieved anything, right? So I'd love to know what you have to say about those. Muffin Chips is saying it's going to come down to the juries this year, with the televote being so volatile and still likely to favor Ukraine. I think juries will back Sweden, Italy, Spain to a lesser extent. I think the juries will probably back Spain quite a bit. I see the reasons, like with Spain, there's so many things to talk about, and I think that this year there isn't a single entry that doesn't have like a substantial reason to be concerned. And even like Sweden, with all the faith that there is in Sweden being the winner, there are certain doubts that I think are valid, as far as like she is a previous winner, and there are all these big expectations, and it's been very interesting to see how that's played out in the fandom because obviously lots of people really love the song and they want to see her win, but it seems like there are a lot of people who are just like, that's boring and we want to see someone else. So I don't know. Sorry, I know I'm kind of all over the map here, but I do think that Spain is going to get quite a bit of Serbia support. Sorry, quite a lot of jury support. I was just reading another comment, and also laughing at this username Philomena Kunk ESC. Can we talk about how it is such a missed opportunity that we aren't getting a Kunk on Eurovision like segments, like interval act, because that would be hilarious. I like, or they should get, if Sweden wins next year, then they have to bring Linda Woodruff back. They have to, and she needs to do like a Kunk on something style segment, and like it's just it's got to happen. Um, Konstantin saying, as much as I like Sama Spava, I can't help but feel like we're in for another Telemovish. And yeah, I see the reasons for that. And like, to speak about Telemovish, I really like that song. I do think that like kind of at the time I was really upset that it didn't qualify, but like in hindsight, I see the reasons why, because there was so much in the song that's hard to connect with, and like if you don't know what's going on, and I don't think that there was enough effort to make it accessible. But again, like a perfect example of the right way to fail, right? It's a like fail in quotes, because there are people who still love that song, and there were artists that year who were also quite upset that it didn't make it to the final. But it's much better to do that than to do something that isn't true to the artist and aiming to please people and ultimately ends up feeling inauthentic, right? Right, Daly saying, I like the UK song, but she's not great. She's not great live. Worried that we're back at the bottom five again. I don't think it's going to be that bad. Again, with like internally selected song, lots to see as far as like staging and everything. It's been interesting because I've actually, here in Canada, I've had that song find its way back to me through people who are not like following Eurovision. There was a friend of mine who was like, "Oh, I came across this song and I found out that it was for Eurovision." So I don't know what that means, but yeah, it's like with those kind of entries, you just kind of have to wait and see. I think the thing about the UK song is that like melodically, it's very flat, and it's something that works very well on the radio. Because I remember hearing it and being like, yeah, this is kind of like, this is a little bit Dua Lipa-esque, maybe a little bit more like what she was doing earlier when she was just breaking through. But yeah, I do wonder, how it's going to go. I think it is going to depend a lot on the visuals in order to elevate it, and I don't think it would be unreasonable to. It's not unreasonable to think that it could get a good score, because if it's like professional and well rounded, then I think that people will still vote for it, and also like has probably one of the best spots. Hello to Neil Era, nice to see you, and glad that you found me. Alejandro, so speaking about Luke Black, I feel super represented by him. Constructa was harder to get and people did, but I get your point. And it's interesting too, because Constructa was also in the third spot in the running order, and that was my favorite entry last year, and I was also super worried about, well, sort of like, because again, if that song were to fail, that would be the way to do it, because it was just so creative and not something that anyone can conceive as being on the Eurovision stage, but it actually like worked super well in the end. So like I'm open to it. It's not a song that I would, let's say, like vote against if that were a thing. Adele Era is also worried for Serbia to qualify. Silivano, any thoughts on dark horses? I'm wondering which songs might surprise. Cyprus and Malta might do better than expected by the fans, for example. I would like to see Malta do better than expected, because I'm pretty sure that people have assumed that it's been given the kiss of death being in the number 2 spot. But like when I saw the music video, because I remember firstly like looking at that selection when it was happening and being like, this is really, really, really dire. But they ended up with what I think is the best song. And the music video, there's so much character in it and so much. Uh, it's just like you could really see a creative spirit behind that, and I feel like if they can bring that to the stage, then it's not unreasonable to think that they could at least qualify. And then in the grand final, there will be more things to wonder about. But as for other ones, um, I haven't said a word about Iceland yet through the videos that I've done, but man, I fucking love Iceland. It's such a pick me up, I find. And it was one that when I watched the live performance, I didn't really think that much of it. But then I think it was the when I heard the studio track, I was like, wow, this is really great. And it is also kind of appealing to my tastes because it's got a bit of a drum and bass vibe to it. It kind of I see it as kind of existing in this middle ground between drum and bass and 80s synth pop and just kind of like modern synth pop. But yeah, I really like Iceland, and I would love her to be one of the entries to be like a dark horse. Another one that I think could be in that spot is Greece. I don't know what the story is behind Greece because like it seemed that people were kind of preemptively before it was released. Maybe there was a leak of a demo, much like there was with Austria, and everybody kind of wrote it off. But I think it's a very well produced track, and I get the guy. Victor's quite young, so I think there does tend to be this idea about like when you have very young artists who are going on such a big stage at that age with not that much experience. There's a question about like are they going to get that like real big bout of stage fright and compromise the performance? But I do think it's a really good song. So yeah, uh, yeah. So people agreeing about me. So like I'm a huge fan of Charlie Brooker, and he's the one that is behind the Kunk On series because it was originally a part of the Wipe series. Most of you have probably heard about Black Mirror on Netflix, and that's also a creation of his. And I just really like his satire. It does seem like doing anything Eurovision related is a bit of a stretch for his brand, but one can dream, right? Um, what else? Constantine saying, I think May has just a very particular voice. She doesn't sound off per se. It's just her tone that works better in the studio with a bit of autotune. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting observation. I haven't actually seen any of her live performances, so like, and that's again like I try not to judge too harshly the pre-party performances because of how frequent it is for there to be technical issues. So yeah, like I see the reasons to be kind of you know curious about how that's going to finish. Groot is all aboard the hype train for Malta. Choo choo. Ry Bailey also saying Iceland is so underrated. Neil Era, I really like Iceland as well, especially because of Delia, great presence, energy, and vocals. Yes, and I think that's totally part of the appeal. I think the song that kept in stage is not usually like it's not as equipped as let's say like MGP or Melody Festivalen. So when we get to Eurovision, there is a chance that it will be elevated quite substantially because like I have no reasons to doubt the actual performance of it. And yeah, like that's the kind of thing where I would love to dream up something for how to present the song. Like I do kind of like how she just kind of does her thing on the stage and she's really energetic and throwing herself about and then like tosses her jacket off. Um, but I think that if they came up with something very clean, like really kind of like the purple that I use, like this purple over here, and using like lasers and yeah, like just very clean color palettes. I think yeah, it could just really be very sound on stage. Um, Constantine saying, to me, Iceland feels like a continuation of paper. Most people like it, but in the end, not enough vote for it since she finishes around 12th, 13th in most countries televote. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to remember back to paper. Um, I see what you mean, but paper, I think the issue with that one was that it just was a bit understated. Like it because it was kind of a mid-tempo pop song and there wasn't enough to grab onto. Whereas I think Power has a pretty memorable chorus, and it's quite energetic, like a lot more energetic than Paper. But like, she's certainly not seen as like anyone with a great trajectory right now. So I hope that we're wrong about that. Hello to Kane78. As a Finn, I probably don't need to worry about our song in semifinal one. No, you do not. But otherwise, I'm worried because I just want so much for Latvia and Malta to qualify. It might be a long shot, unfortunately. So yes, there's also Latvia, which, yeah. What more can I say about that? Um, I also kind of feel the same way about like if you're gonna fail, so to speak, that's the way to do it because they are a notable band in Latvia. They're clearly coming from an indie pop realm. They're not like obsessed with following all the the main trends or like they just have a very different sensibility to what they do, and so it is unfortunate that they are so early in the show. I do think that what could really save that is if the live performance was really made into like a visual experience that you can't forget. And I think about like Midnight Gold from Georgia 2016, where like also kind of like an indie electro rock song that didn't really register for most people, but like that from a visual point of view was just unforgettable, and it might have been a little bit too much. So maybe if they were to find like a happy medium between what they did at Supernova and something that like just really makes it a moment where you have to keep your eyes glued to the screen, then that could at least help. But obviously, a few things working against them. They also don't have any neighborly support, unfortunately. But just give me a second. I haven't actually taken a sip of my tea yet. Alejandro saying, I think Latvia is objectively one of the best songs. Alternative rock gem with an instrumental that is so good that could be a song in itself and a singer that's on point. Good lyrics too. Yeah, I agree. I think that there are certain things that I have to be careful with what I say here because I don't want to be speaking outside of my expertise. But I think that there could have been more done to make like the melody of it more engaging. I it's because I don't find it to be a very memorable song, but whenever I'm watching it, I enjoy it, and it's not hard for me to buy into what they're selling, but when it comes to putting all the songs in a semifinal next to each other, it's not necessarily the song that is giving me the most feeling. Um, it would be great if, let's say, that there was more of an alternative eye on Eurovision, and if there were various alternative like blogs and whatnot that would look at a band like Sudden Lights and kind of drive attention to the show, so that you could get the alternative crowd like looking at it. I mean, obviously there are people from the alternative crowd that like it anyway, but it's just that people can sometimes look down at Eurovision, and especially if they're heavily invested into musical styles that are not pop music. It's seen as beneath them. Um, but yeah, like I think there are certainly very valid reasons to question how well it could do at Eurovision, right? But anyway, I'm kind of rambling, so let me drink some more tea and see what you're saying. So Rye Bailey saying not keen on Latvia. Um, Philomena Kunk saying Malta had a great reaction at address Liverpool. I think they have a shot at qualifying. So that's the Norwegian program, I believe, where they run through all the songs, and they have like a panel of commentators, and then they have a panel of Euro fans. So that's pretty good. I do think that it has Eurofan appeal in it, certainly, and I think anytime that you show up to Eurovision with a saxophone, people immediately go, "Oh, epic sax guy." But I mean, it's certainly encouraging, and yeah, I truly don't think that any song is dead on arrival this year. Some people definitely have their picks. I mean, ultimately, we're going to end up with 11 non-qualifiers anyway. But I do think that there is a path to the final for them. Constantine saying, I think with the Netherlands kind of tanking right now, Latvia's chances have increased with more votes in the slow pop rock radio friendly niche being freed up. Yeah, and that's another thing that I know has come out recently about with respect to the pre-parties, because as I understand, the Netherlands performances have not been that um, not been that not been that good, right? Um, so yeah, it's possible. It's possible that even with their really nice spot in the running order, and like especially from the fandom hasn't really warmed up to that song quite a bit anyway. So yeah, it could be possible that it's a done deal for them. But I also think that the Netherlands, as a delegation, they know how to stage. Even last year, like I remember in the rehearsals kind of feeling a bit like it wasn't enough, but then more and more as we saw it get closer to the broadcast of the first semifinal, it felt like the emotion was coming through. It felt like all the pieces came together. So I wouldn't be surprised if they just make it through anyway. But yes, like if that song no longer it can take advantage of being later in the running order, then maybe a spot would be freed up for Latvia or Malta or both, right? Alejandro saying, I love Midnight Gold, but this is better. Latvia reminds me a bit more of Tom York. It's interesting because my partner actually said it reminds him of 15 Step by Radiohead, right? And like my mind kind of went there, not in the exact same way, but because the beginning has that percussive intro. Yeah, it's like a superficial connection that I made. Ry Bailey saying, after 7 years of not qualifying, Georgia is finally going to make it. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one because when you listen to the song, it has impact. It's very it's a moment for Iru as a vocalist to demonstrate her abilities. But as people who have like looked at the lyrics know, what the hell is going on, right? Thing is known, yeah, yeah. Thing is known, and what's the other one? Love is a wordless. So like, yeah, if this were if this were a songwriting contest, I don't know if that would be I don't know how well that would be appreciated, but it certainly seems to be like the best possibility for them to qualify. Diogo saying, you're quite well spoken. Thank you. I don't really feel like that at the moment. I feel like my mind's kind of going all over the place. So even when I don't agree with you at all, you almost convince me otherwise. Ah, very interesting. It's good to know that I have that level of persuasion. Hello to Benny. Hey, Stuart, with the recent announcement of the opening and interval acts for the semifinals, is there one you're looking forward to the most? Uh, I did see not too long ago Maria Yaremchuk, which I guess is like, it's not like she's an artist that I follow, but obviously like everybody knows her because of the hamster wheel and for TikTok, right? There isn't one in particular that I'm most excited to see because of that selection of artists. They're not ones that I've followed, and I suppose that I was kind of hoping to see like Goe or even Verka Saduchka, but at the same time, like I'm just, any artist who gets the opportunity, I'm certainly open to. And from the two shows that Ukraine hosted on home soil, they had great interval acts and like a really great approach to the to the technical to like the production design. I really like what they do. So if they're giving input and like choosing certain artists that are going to fit their vibe, then I'm definitely looking forward to them. And I also just feel like Ukraine, when it comes to their national selection and their general approach to Eurovision, they have a certain je ne sais quoi that is really admirable. Constantine saying, I'm still not writing the Netherlands out because there is an audience for normal radio pop. Hey, I happen to like the song. Like I was actually, it was one of those songs that kind of popped up in my mind earlier today. But yeah, I see why. I do know that like sometimes you're often looking for more, and there's other songs this year where I have that feeling towards where like to me it's hard to see it as anything more than just a radio song. But anyway, especially in a semifinal with so many out there songs. But if those vocals remain as they are, yeah. And honestly, the thing is, however, we talk about how like, well, maybe not we, But certain people talk about how juries, they tend to favor songs that are very radio friendly but have vocal performances to make up for them. The televote has historically not really cared for bad vocal performances. So, I mean, in that case, like there isn't a lot of like other Eurofan qualities to make up for it. So I don't think that they would necessarily be saved by not performing very well. But yeah, like this whole thing with the juries not existing in the semifinals, I've seen a lot of people who are also concerned about how that's going to go. But yeah, I do think that being able to sing your song should be a quality that doesn't get overlooked. Um, Neil Era saying Netherlands just need to keep it simple and they will stand out and improve the vocals. Alejandro saying, coming back to Radiohead, when they rearranged the lyrics of Idiotech in a way that barely made sense, but at the same time they evoke a lot of meanings, it was called high art. Why not Georgia? Yeah, I mean, and look, like if you get anyone to respond to your song, regardless of how it is, you've done something right. And there are certainly songs that I like that are not lyrical masterpieces. Um, I don't put this on the same level as Georgia's song this year, but there's a song from the Finnish selection in 2020 called "Love Review" by Sansa, which I like fell in love with right away, and I still listen to it to this day. And the thing about it was that the lyrics themselves, when you look at them on their own, they are kind of unusual, but the way that Sansa was singing them, it just fit the feeling of the song. And she's singing like the idea that I got from "I Want to Be Your Love Review" was like, I want to be the one that you look at, the one who you kind of get like the tunnel vision for, and you get the warm fuzzies, right? But even though the words themselves, like you wouldn't say those to like you wouldn't like try and seduce someone that way. It was just it's such a vibe, and I can't divorce them from the song regardless. And so yeah, like I fucking love that song. Um, yeah, anyway, kind of going off on a tangent, but yeah, like lyrics aren't everything, and certainly a lot of people are criticizing the lyrics of Tattoo, for example. um, I see why. They're not the most innovative lyrics. That's a fact, but I don't think that they get in the way of the song. I think that they serve the purpose of the song, and Loreen makes them believable when she performs them, so I have no problem with them. Philomena Kunk saying, I wish Go A could open the semifinal with the first version of Shum. Yeah, it. I'm not ruling out the possibility that we'll see Goe in some way. Maybe even just like I know that Kate had given out the points for Ukraine last year, so I don't think that they'll have her do it again. But I don't know. Maybe they'll be around, or maybe even just to perform at one of the various events that they have going on at Liverpool. Um, Constantine saying the jury debacle was really badly handled by the EBU. Instead of straight up removing them, they could have just taken them out of the broadcaster's control and give it to a third party to organize. So I agree that this was not the solution. I do have to kind of like think about how broadcasters operate and how the EBU operates, and like it should be up to the broadcaster to select a jury that isn't going to collude. To kind of take that on for the EBU to be like, no, we're going to do that for you. One, it doesn't necessarily mean that the collusion won't happen. And two, it creates a lot of work on their part. And what you have to remember is that in any preparation for Eurovision, it is always a partnership. There's a lot of things that get handled on the EBU side, but then there's also a lot of things that get handled on the part of the host broadcaster, and then all the individual broadcasters are kind of taking care of their own things, and then they come together and make Eurovision happen, right? So I could see the reluctance for the EBU to be like, no, we're going to choose, because you also have to have somewhat of an idea of like who the people are, and how qualified they are, and a broadcaster would probably have a better idea of that because it's local to their country, right? So and the thing is about this unfortunate issue is that I don't think that there is a singular perfect solution. I would not have chosen this one to take the juries out of the semifinals, but we'll see how it goes, right? And you know, maybe they'll be reintroduced after a few editions. I so there is a video that Jan Bors, the former head of delegation for the Czech Republic, did a few days ago about this topic specifically. And in my comment to him, I said the you know more or less the same thing. And I think the kind of like slippery slope worst case scenario idea is that we would go back to the 2000s, which some people would like be all for. That would be like the end of me being a Eurovision fan personally. I don't think it would ever get that bad, but yeah, it is gonna suck if let's say that you know Mia and Dion actually end up performing really well, and you know the attitude changes leading up to the semifinal performance, and then they finish 11th. And then later on, we do like I don't think we are going to be getting how the juries vote in the semifinals because they are still voting. It's just not. It's only used in the event of the televote not being available or being there if there's like an issue. So let's say that they ended up doing like super well with the juries, and then basically we find out that the reason why they didn't qualify was simply because it was like, oh well, that audience didn't like it at that time. And like the other thing too is that like some people would argue like, okay, if you only finish 11th, 12th, or whatever, like you know, in the case of Azerbaijan last year where they were last with 0 points with the audience, like, do you really deserve to be in the final? And I think it's a fair argument, but still, like, I would rather have that over someone who can't sing their own song, and or like something that is like very clearly trying to you know just it might sound pretentious to say this, but like appeal to the lowest common denominator and do something that's really like wacky and tasteless. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But I'd love to know what you have to say about that. Philomena Kunk saying, I appreciate juries, but my biggest problem with them is not appreciating ethnic songs and songs outside of the box, which is it's true to an extent, but like I think what I see a lot is to use Goe as an example. Oh, the juries robbed Goe. They did not. Goe brought what was a pretty divisive song for a lot of reasons, not just because of the ethnic side of it, but because you know, like the white voice is not a typical style of singing, and it's not what some people find pleasant to listen to. So you know, people are certainly in their right to not like it. But that song still finished ninth with the juries, so it was appreciated. It wasn't a jury favorite, and that yes, that had brought it down to the point where it wasn't going to win. But I don't think that like I don't think that anyone was really seriously considering it to be a winner. I was like so thrilled because that was my favorite song that year as well, and I was so thrilled that it got second with the televote. That was just like I couldn't have asked for anything better. Um, but yeah, so I see I see the arguments made with respect to the juries and how they vote, but I think that the and other people have made this point too. I think that the jury and televote they balance each other out in the right way for what Eurovision is nowadays. And you know, maybe in the future we can make further adjustments to that. But yeah, I'm in favor of keeping it 50-50 as much as we can. Um, Silvano, sorry, every time I look at your name, it's so small, and I don't want to say it wrong. It's been interesting to see the UK stepping up quality in their entries recently. I think their selection process has helped. I think national selections work for some, but Ireland should change the selection. Yeah, Ireland selection just doesn't do any justice to the artists that are there. Like it's not a studio that's well equipped to bring a song that or to like sell a song that could have much better chances on a bigger stage. Like I think that you need to meet in the middle somewhere. You can't just kind of plot people in the corner of your studio and have the cameras wave around and put them in front of like an LED wall, right? Um, but yes, with respect to the UK, we'll see if this continues, right? Because there was somebody earlier today who said that they wonder if the UK will finish in the bottom five. I personally don't think that it's going to be that bad this year, but yeah, like obviously we want to see that momentum continue, and we want that relationship with tap music to bring forward more acts, and it would also be nice to see the UK be adventurous because like uh, last year with Sam Ryder and Spaceman, they did a really good thing by choosing something that sounded like a classically written British song from like the 1970s. And then this is, I wrote a song is certainly much more like nowadays. It fits very well on the radio. Um, but it would be nice to see like what more we can get from the UK. And there are lots of very interesting styles of music that are associated with the UK. So it would be cool to see them be a little bit more adventurous and not get too bogged down in like what is familiar. Anyway, I don't know if I might be contradicting myself, but usually this is where editing saves me because if I ever say anything wrong, I can just say it again and people will be like, "Oh, you're such a oh my God, you're such a good talker." Um, Alejandro, the thing about juries is that they do not vote the best music, best songs, best artists, none of that. They vote for the act that they think makes the most sense to win Eurovision. It's I don't 100% agree, but I see where you're coming from, and I think I'll leave it there. I like especially when this announcement was made back in November about how the semifinals were going to change, we weren't going to get the juries. Um, People were looking back and thinking about what entries we would have lost under that system. And the truth is, even though I am a defender of the jury system, there were a lot more songs that had actually missed out that I would have wanted in the final, like Blackbird, like Ella from Cyprus last year, which I do have to say that what really did her in was her jury show, which was quite a bit worse than the actual live broadcast, which like also certain people had their criticisms of, but I didn't think was that bad. But I really like came around to liking that song, and I think that it would have been something. It would have added something that was missing from that grand final, which was quite slow, but good quality slow, if you ask me. Um, but yes, Muffin Chip saying I would have kept the juries in the semis, but introduced a rule that basically says you need to score at least 1 point from the juries and televote to advance. Yeah, there is something to be said about having like a certain threshold. Um, and I mean, I guess that's kind of what they were trying to do when they had the wild card system. But yeah, like I think the problem is Eurovision is so complicated as it is, right? And you do still have to explain it to people. And if you the more layers that you add to it, the harder it is to communicate it, and like you end up losing people. And even like when I explain certain things to my family who have really taken to Eurovision quite a lot more than I was expecting, they ask me like how does the scoring work, and I'll be like, okay, well you have to land in the top 10 between either the juries or the televote, and as long as you're in that range, then you get points. And like it still doesn't make sense to them. So yeah, like I could see, to me that sounds like a pretty decent solution, but again I see the reluctance in adding too many layers to make it more and more complicated. But yeah, excuse me as I take another sip. Hello to Eric Anderson. Do you think the televote will be much more spread out this year rather than a few countries taking in most of the points? Possibly. Um, I think the thinking behind that is because it's the televote that decides the qualifiers. Will that televote support also translate in the final? The argument that I have kind of against that is there is such a substantial difference between who watches the semifinals and who watches the grand final. Like the grand final audience is so much bigger. At least like that's the impression that I've been given based off of the handful of numbers that we see, because we only get the grand final figures, and then you have to look more at a local level to find out who tuned in or how many people tuned in for the semifinals. Um, And so I've often wondered, like, maybe because the fans are the ones that are more tuned in, maybe it is the fans that actually have a greater impact on the qualifiers. Not like the greatest. I think that there's still enough of a casual audience that will vote, that will tune in on a Tuesday or Thursday night to make it happen. Excuse me. But yeah, like, it is possible. It's possible that the televote will be more spread out, and that because the other side of that is perhaps the jury will have like a fatter top than they have in the past, because usually the jury points are a bit more spread out, and the televote votes en masse for things like, well, obviously, Kalish Orchestra last year, Zitio Boni, Maneskin from 2021, so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I see the argument in that, because if the songs that make it through from the semifinals are not the ones with the most jury appeal, then yeah, there might be more than one song that gets 0 points from the juries. But yeah, Philomena Kunk saying, I'm still happy jury saved songs like Karma, Mal, and Omie. Yes, and all of those songs are ones that I like would not have. I can't imagine those not being in the final. Kobe saying, still not over Ella and Secret from last year. Yeah, and I think so. Between the two, like, I already kind of made a case for Ella. With Secret, so what I find about that whole saga of Albania 2022 was that, like, there were a lot of reasons to be critical of that entry, but I think because it was one of those yassified girl bops, people tend to take things to the extremes, and it's like, this is either the best thing ever or complete and utter garbage, and it was neither of those things. I think that what they were aiming for, they didn't quite succeed at what they were aiming for, because they were trying to do something that Spain was doing, and I don't necessarily mean that those songs were identical, but in the sense that it was meant to be like a powerful pop performance with a lot of like urban appeal, and with a heavily choreographed routine, sex appeal, all those kinds of things, and it just didn't come together in most ways, sadly. At the same time, it's not to say that it couldn't. If let's say that they had a very polished performance, and like if Ranella was vocally flawless, then yeah, I think that song could have very easily qualified, but it just didn't work out that way. So yeah, and I mean, I think that maybe there'd be a better argument to be made if that song finished higher with the televote, because then I think you could properly call it a robbery, but it is what it is. Neil Era saying, I can't with Omie when we lost Igranka. Oh yeah, I do like me some Igranka. Dun, 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 dun. Karma when we had Fear of Phlegm. So yeah, and that's another one where it's like, I quite liked what was that song called? Öv oss Pahananden. I think I practiced that one a lot, because Danish is not necessarily like intuitive to me or to most people. But yeah, the thing about that one, I think what really did that one in was following Jean's tears, because I remember watching those rehearsals that year with Eurovox. I was following things from my home in Toronto through the digital press center, and like me and my partner, we both found Tout l'univers to be so moving, and when Denmark followed that with something that was fun, and something that we both really enjoyed, and then also wasn't like vocally all the way there. It was a bit of a mood whiplash, and it did seem like an odd way to finish the show. So I think that might have played a part in their low jury score. But yes, it would have been nice to see them in the final, because I'm trying to think of what songs from that semifinal qualified. Well, I mean, I definitely could have gone with that one over Moldova, let's say, but that's another argument. Ed saying, I want a wild card system because I'm not ready to lose Latvia this year. Now, I do wonder if Latvia, if let's say that they were to have a jury wild card, I don't know if Latvia would be the one that gets saved. It's certainly a possible one, but like, I guess it depends on because we don't know who is truly not qualifying. Um, if the Netherlands doesn't qualify via televote, then I think that, yeah, and kind of, alluding to some of the things that we've said before about how, to some people it's just, radio friendly pop, just another ballad. I think it has a really solid chorus. I'm not too sold on the end of the song, but the whole na, 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 like I really like that. Um, but yeah, like it is comforting to think that would be a way for Latvia to make it true, but we'll see. Um, and then we've got, yeah, I was worried about opening up the Pandora's box of secrets, but Kobe saying sabotaged yourself with the staging. They changed too much from the selection. Yeah, there were elements of the staging that I really liked, especially the kind of middle part where you get the lights go down and she's dancing with the female dancer. I thought that was great, and I feel like if they could have kept a lot of that energy for the rest of the song and kind of not depended too much on the male dancers, then yeah, I think that would have been a lot better, but uh, that sadly it was not that. Secret was an absolute mess on stage. It would have been a shame. It would have been a shame for it to qualify, but what we got instead was low key even worse. Yeah, so um, yeah, with Boys Do Cry, I remember being like so torn about that because I do think that one should have stayed in the semifinals in hindsight. Um, but I don't know. It is what it is. Maybe I don't really have any thoughts to share about that. But we'll move on. Hello to Jose Santos. Are you worried about any performance going live in ESC? And which songs are you singing in your head lately? So many. I've mentioned a few already earlier in the live, but Iceland is one that comes back to me a lot. Sweden, of course, big fan of Sweden. Austria, Finland, Spain, a few more. Even like earlier today, it was the Netherlands. Even though like it's not among my favorite songs, but I think there are positive songwriting qualities in that, that I don't know, that they register with me. Croatia, I I do really like Croatia. I also kind of had the, as with many people, I assume, like watching it the first time, being like, all right, this is that, because that entry certainly feels like Eurovision's from the 2000s. But no, I'm on board with it. It, anyone who's seen the video that I made about that, I do kind of feel like there's the humorous side of it, but then there's also like a real sense of frustration and anger at what's going on in the world behind that too. So yeah, I'm all for it. And as for ones that I'm worried about, uh, I mean, we've talked about a few already. Iceland would be one of the ones that I guess I don't know if it has strong enough appeal, but I would like to think that it could be a dark horse. I think what I got to do is I got to pull the list open because I am blanking on a lot of a lot of entries. Um, well, Portugal, one of my favorite entries, but I've seen all the love for it too. It seems like especially people from Portugal are also really happy for it. I do wonder if maybe it might be lacking a bit of popular appeal. And that would be one where if we had our regular 50-50 jury system, I don't think I would have any trouble because it's well performed. And the Portuguese delegation for the last few editions has shown that they really know how to stage. Um, and so I'm expecting the exact same thing this time. But yeah, that would be one where I'm not 100% sure if it's gonna be to the audience's liking, sadly. So I hope I'm wrong though. Um, Constantine saying Vespahanandan would have made it if it wasn't for Kirchhoff's in bulk purchases. Well, we'll file that under speculation for now. But yes, I've heard the suspicions and especially when you look at the voting patterns, it doesn't seem that unheard of. But that's all I'll say about it. Allegations. Um, Philomena saying, normally I love the Netherlands entries, but this is at the bottom of my ranking. In a strong semi, uh, in this strong semi, I would be disappointed if they qualify. Yeah, and that's the other thing too, like just the strength of semi-final one as it's looking so far. Yeah, yeah, there are some entries where it just seems like if they had shuffled things around, like earlier we were talking about Serbia, and I think that Serbia would be an entry that um, wouldn't struggle quite as much if it were in semifinal two, and then perhaps a little bit later. But I might be wrong about that. Like, they might have no problem because the other thing too is that the songs that are all the songs that are early, with the exception of Norway, which is essentially a shoe-in. Yeah, Malta and Latvia, which we've talked about tonight. There are some doubts there, and then Portugal as well, which comes right after that. Um, so yeah, such is Eurovision. But I've been on for an hour now, and I was just kind of testing the waters with this live broadcasting. So I'm very happy that I did get some people in here. Maybe I'll stick around if you have other things to ask, other thoughts. One thing that I want to ask of you guys is, do you listen to the backing tracks, because they were just released earlier this week, and that's actually one of my favorite things to do, to hear the songs without the lead vocal, so you can get a better idea of how the instrumentation is. And I want to know if you've been listening to that as well. Kovi saying, I believe Netherlands last year had a stronger song. I wouldn't be necessarily disappointed if they made it through. And that's how I feel as well. Like, the Deepta was great, was really, really great. But yeah, it's like, I guess I'm kind of indifferent to them. Like, I would be happy for them, because I appreciate the way that the Netherlands treats Eurovision, because they do it seriously. Even like, let's say 2015, which certainly had its reasons to be critical. I think it was a good song, and quite catchy and well performed. And so there's still, even though you can make arguments for why that song was not presented in the best way, I still see that as a good way to not qualify. Whereas, there are other times where people are like trying too hard, or they're, just up there with some nonsense that feels like a waste of time, where I'm just like, never mind you. Um, Alejandro saying, yes, I was listening to the backing tracks, and I think Spain has the best one. Yeah, I mean, like, I've talked a little bit about Spain today, but like, what an incredible work of art that is. It is just so captivating, and I think, like, truly, I- if I'm being honest, like, that is probably my favorite song. I have such an attachment to Loreen, so that's why, like, to me, it's like 12 points go to Loreen, 12 points from Stu, from the country of Stu, go to Loreen. But like, really, they're both on such a different plane. And then, like, I'll put Carria up there as well, because it's also on a different plane, but the the sense that I get from that is just how fun it is. But yes, the instrumental from Spain is great. Um, oh yes, the Romania revamp shocked me. Quite different, right? Like, has this acoustic intro that lasts almost the full first minute of the song, and then by the time things get going, you get a tempo change. And I don't think we actually have. I'm trying to think. Are there other songs this year with the tempo change, like a real one? Um, but yeah, that one also took me by surprise too, and it does make me think, because in the kind of overview video that I did, I pointed out Romania as being one that is likely to struggle, for many reasons, and I do still think that's true. But maybe they'll be able to. At least they've made it more dynamic with this new cut, right? So yeah, uh, Alejandro saying, Latvia has a great backing track as well. Constantine, yes, I love listening to instrumentals every year, and I'm surprised every year by some of them. Like, I was surprised by how strong the Albanian production is. Oh yeah, yeah, and Albania is one that has crept into my head, surprisingly. Like, I've never disliked the song, but I like, just in watching it at Festival Ikungus, I remember just thinking, like, it just doesn't feel like Eurovision presentable. And that's the kind of thing, when I was talking about star power, for example, which might not be the most fair criteria to weight a song on. If, let's say, that Albania does qualify, then I could see that not really connecting that well with the juries. So yeah, and like how you would get around that, I don't know. Like because really especially a song like that, which is really it sounds quite Balkan and is in native Albanian Geg, or Geg Albanian. Sorry if I didn't get the terminology right, but yeah, like I maybe it's just that when you get all these people who are in industry folk and it's just not the kind of music that they're used to. Maybe that's why we don't see those kinds of songs get responded to as much from the juries. Um, so Kobe, the backing tracks, you can find them. There might be different rules around the geo blocking, but I found them all on YouTube. They're listed as karaoke tracks, and some of them are not instrumental because they'll have like the backing tracks in there. Um, but yeah, they should all be there. What do you think is the Malta 2021 this year? I think it's France. I don't hate it, but very overblown by Eurofans. It could be France, honestly. And like I just think that so I'll say France and Czechia. To me, they just seem like the songs that are very typically appreciated by Euro fans. It's not as if they're without their qualities. France certainly has the potential to be like a big moment, but like I was saying this to my partner earlier, and it like that song, you know that there's going to be some drag queen out there performing the song in a very similar way, and it's essentially like a drag song, right? But it's just performed by a cisgender woman, who I believe to be a cisgender woman, because I don't want to be don't want to assume. But anyway, um, yeah. So I think that that's possible. And then with Czechia, I think the kind of off-putting factor about it for me is that it it seems to be trying like I don't want to say that's trying too hard because I do think that band is doing something that they believe in, but I feel as if there are certain qualities in it that just make it a little bit too Eurovision for me, like the mix of languages. Certainly, there's a reason to have those mix of languages, but it's again, it's like we're on a multinational stage, so we're going to perform in this many languages, and yeah, like I will say that the Czech Republic is one that often elevates their songs with staging, like pretty consistently. So, there might not be anything to worry about. But people have been talking about Czechia being a possible winner, and I even before we had these heavyweights come out. But yeah, I've just never felt it myself. So let's see. Maybe it will change. Um, Constantine saying, I think SJB will get Albania to a presentable place. She can do wonders with anything. Yeah, I mean, it isn't to say that there haven't been entries. So SJB being Sasha Jean-Baptiste, who has done stagings for like Cyprus 2018, obviously like a huge fan favorite. We were talking about Malta 2021 earlier. She did that one too. Some of you will list them. Oh, well, Midnight Gold, Georgia 2016 was hers as well. But yeah, I mean, I think she might have some great ideas for how to do that because I've always wanted to see that performance because it's a family. I love this idea of doing like a tableau performance with like doing like a family portrait and have like a moving tableau. I think there's a very delicate approach that could work very well. But the thing too, as well, with Sasha Jean-Baptiste is that one of the most prominent features of her stagings is that there's this big orchestration to the movement, right? Like, even with a slower song like Boys You Cry from Switzerland last year, all the movements are choreographed and he's moving his arms like that and reaching in certain moments, and the camera follows that. The camera cuts are often very fast. And I don't think that would be the best fit for Albania, but I could be wrong. In any case, oh, interesting. For Filomena, Dia is slowly sneaking into my top 5. Definitely a growth for me. Kobe, Czechia still hasn't clicked for me. I really don't know why. Shocked that Duya is last in the betting odds. Frequently, Albania is last, and so I assume that you're talking about the odds to win. Actually, well, so I've got them open here. So qualifying for semifinal two. So they're not last for qualifying. So then, yeah, it must be for winning. Yeah, so one thing to remember about the odds is that it's not a reflection of how people think that the songs are going to finish. Like, so if a song is fifth in the odds, it's not assuming that that song is going to finish fifth in the grand final. Um, but in any case, like, yeah, with Albania, it's just because they have never really sent anything that has winner potential. Their best results, fifth with Rona Nishliu, um, I mean, it was certainly a very powerful performance, but like in a year with Loreen and other songs that were tipped at being better opportunities to win. Yeah, I would love to see Albania be tipped as a winner one year because then they'll finally be able to dig themselves out of that bottom spot. But who knows, right? Um, Christopher saying the new voting system plus a finish win, not good news for serious entries in the upcoming years. So I see why you're saying that, but I think I think there's an important distinction. You need to distinguish between like a fun, humorous entry and something that is like not serious and not professional. I consider this to be a professional entry. It's just it has a kind of like a silly, jokey spirit to it. The song is great, in my opinion. It really is. It is one of the best songs that we have this year. Um, excuse me. But like I think an example of doing the joke entry the wrong way is Germany 2021, where they had this idea of like I'm just gonna go up there on stage and be really theatrical and talk like act as if like nothing ever bothers me. Any kind of hate you can send my way is not going to affect me. And like and then oh haha, there's a peace sign, but every now and then the finger gets lowered and it's a middle finger. Like it was just it was I honestly think it was the least professional performance that I've seen at modern Eurovision in like how many years. It was really that bad, and then it ended up getting a really low score because of that. Um, so I don't think I wouldn't say the same thing about Finland. I think Finland is like it connects to people in a very obvious way, right? Like his whole thing about just wanting to let loose, have his pina coladas, and out on the dance floor. No, it works really well, and the song's catchy. It's got this like really a bit of a chaotic but like somehow naturally flowing mix of genres. So yeah, I'm all for that. Hello to Alberto. Nice to see you. Uh, Unfortunately, I think I'm going to be wrapping things up now because it has been a while. And uh, yeah, I'm very grateful again for all of you who I was actually wrapping things up a few minutes ago, but I am very grateful for all of you who tuned in because I really didn't know how this was going to go with the channel. But if you have just come across this channel, I would love for you to subscribe because I'd love to know what your other thoughts are about the entries that we have this year. I hope to have more videos back. I was hoping to get another one out this weekend, but this has kind of been the one that's in its place. If you weren't here earlier, because I actually can't even remember if I talked about it, but I am going to Liverpool actually, and so I will be aiming to make videos about being there at the event. And if any of you are going to Liverpool too, I hope to see you and talk to you in person. But nonetheless, I'm again very grateful for all the love that you give to me. And I guess if you're watching this after the fact, oh, hold on. There's one more question. Alberto, what do you think about Blanca Paloma's new opening for her song using the electric guitar and violin bow? I mean, I think that it is a very smart thing because of how that song is. I think it was a very smart thing to present the song, to make tweaks to the song for the different performances. I think that ultimately, I think I've even heard Blanca say that the version that gets taken to Eurovision will be most similar to the version at Benidorm Fest, which suggests that there will be tweaks and little additions, much like we saw for Slow Mo last year. But yeah, yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's cool to see how songs can be. like not necessarily revamped, because we think of the a song's first version and then the Eurovision version as a revamp. But I come from the world of electronic music, when you'd have EPs of several remixes, like dozens of remixes of the same song, and some of them are even kind of like they're just slight adjustments, or like the VIPs variants in production, right? So yeah, I think that's really cool that they have that approach, and I wish that other entries would have that too. Oh, hello, Fernanda Costa. Yes, I mean, I am wrapping up now, but thank you. I'm so glad that you found me, and we'll leave it there, I suppose. I know I've said thank you and goodbye like a million times, but thank you again. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would love for you to do so that we can keep talking about further Eurovision entries, and I hope to see you then. Take care.